CTV National News with Lloyd Robertson.
Good evening. Canada's suspected spy appeared in court today after hours of conversation with investigators. The Crown said it had enough information to include the Soviet Union in the charges against Stephen Joseph Ratke. It said Moscow was the intended destination for classified documents from a U.S. base in Newfoundland. No plea was entered today, and Ratke's lawyer said his client is still being interrogated. Ken Ernhofer has more.
Stephen Joseph Ratke was under heavy guard and closed-mouthed as he entered the St. John's courtroom.
Anything to the charges, Mr. Ratke?
He also delayed entering a plea on what are now 3 charges of espionage. Ratke was arrested outside a St. John's hotel last Saturday after allegedly receiving documents believed to be from the U.S. military. The 2 new charges allege he was in the Newfoundland capital in May of last year and last December and did the same thing. It was apparently a sting operation because it involved a deep cover official of the U.S. military base at Argentia, Newfoundland, a presumed listening post against Soviet submarines. The charges now name the Soviet Union as the country that would have found the information useful. Solicitor General James Kelleher said investigators decided to implicate the Soviet Union after they questioned Ratke.
We just didn't want to recklessly name a country without being absolutely sure.
It's unclear how much Ratke has now told investigators or whether any information he allegedly gathered made it to the Soviet Union. Meantime, Ratke's life remains sketchy. After a 2-year investigation, the charges say his address is unknown. Ratke's plea could come at a bail hearing on June 28th. The Crown has already served notice it wants him to stay in custody. Among the countless questions still unanswered are how important this alleged spy operation was and whether anyone else was involved. Ken Ernhofer, CTV News, St. John's.
The federal government is proposing big changes to Canada's parole system. It wants prisoners to spend more time behind bars before they're allowed out. Ottawa says the reforms would help keep violent criminals off the streets. But some say the changes wouldn't solve any problems. Mark Sixtrom reports.
Thousands of convicts are successfully paroled each year, but a violent few like Alan Sweeney have used the opportunity to murder and rape. Sweeney killed a 21-year-old caseworker while staying in a halfway house. That and similar incidents have prompted the government to propose tough new rules for parole. Inmates would have to serve at least half of their prison sentence instead of the current 1/3 before they can apply for parole. There would also be less time off for good behavior, and there would be new restrictions on day paroles and temporary absences.
My bottom line is that public safety must override all other factors in determining whether an inmate is ready and able to make the successful transition back into society on conditional release.
The John Howard Society doesn't believe longer sentences are the answer. They say few inmates commit violent crimes upon release, and it's wrong to suggest that society is under siege.
The assumption is that somehow or other previous parole boards were a little less than responsible on who they released. That's absolute nonsense. They were very responsible. They didn't give releases willy-nilly or without cause. They did do the reviews. They did make the best judgment possible to them.
Robert Bryden is an ex-con who spent more than 10 years in prison for armed robbery. He says the government should do more to treat and educate prisoners before they are paroled.
The prison system's nothing more than a bunch of warehouses, really, for human bodies. There's no motivation. There's very few tangible programs inside where people can catch on to that will equip them for when they are released.
The group Victims of Violence welcomes the changes, but it wants action now, not proposals.
We want more. We want some action. We want a bill presented in the House of Commons, and a bill that will be passed within a very short period of time that will allow for the further protection of society.
It's going to be at least 3 or 4 years before these changes are implemented. The government wants to consult the provinces and the public, and even when these new rules become law, they'll only apply to new offenders.